fighting for survival, determined to succeed, and intent on getting the scum of the streets before they got to him, and everyone he cared about. Most men would have taken smaller steps, lost themselves in the shadows, and chosen concealment as the safest option. But not Broderick. His every stride sent his cloak swirling in the dank, thick fog hanging on the London streets. Broderick narrowed his eyes, taking in his surroundings. He discovered early on that timidity was oftentimes more perilous than boldness. As such, he'd never been one to mince steps or words or to present himself as anything other than the leader of London's underworld. He abruptly stopped. His senses immediately went on alert. Doing a quick sweep, he raised his knife close. A whore with heavily rouged cheeks and unkempt, oily black hair stepped out of the shadows. "Hey, Governor, what a good time," she purred, her barely discernible King's English roughened by Cockney and misery. He nudged his chin in a silent order that she step aside. "I've other pleasures awaiting me this night, love." Desperation glittered in her bloodshot eyes. "You're looking for a man to take? I can find you one of those too, if you let me," she whispered. Desperation or stupidity, or mayhap a combination of both, made her careless. She stretched her calloused fingers out past his knife and ran cracked, dirt-filled nails along the lapels of his cloak. "Or mayhap a lass or lad?" she asked, her voice brightening. Repulsion snaked through him, along with something else, long-buried disgust for the person he'd been a lifetime ago. Nay, how much he had been just like her. The street rat's presence stirred reminders he didn't want. Not at this time, not when he was at his most vulnerable. But the door had been cracked open earlier, and the memories would not stay buried, forcing Broderick momentarily back to himself as a lad. Once pampered and then orphaned, new to East London. His father's sins and mistakes had left Broderick alone, with his honour for sale and the hunger to survive strong. Begging for a scrap, selling the whereabouts of others if it meant he didn't have to be buggered against a wall by men who at the time had been bigger and more ruthless than Broderick. Self-loathing for the weak boy he'd been soured his mouth and renewed his purpose. Broderick fished out a small purse and tossed it over. Her reflexes were slowed from drink, and the sack slipped through the woman's fingers. Like the rats the men and women of the Dials were forced to be, she tossed herself prostrate upon the meagre offering and then scurried off, her figure disappearing within the swirl of grey fog. Broderick resumed his hunt. He stopped at the corner of Monmouth Street. Holding his dagger close, he worked his gaze over his surroundings. In no more than 3 hours, this place would be brimming with barefoot children hawking fraying boots and old shoes they'd filched from dead bodies or slumbering drunks. Pickpockets would be weaving amongst a crush of bodies out to buy or sell their wares. But at this hour, battered souls surrendered to the grip of exhaustion and a too brief respite from the hell that was the Dials. The Woodyard Brewery stood, an impressive red brick structure, as a deceptive facade of respectability lent to a godless, soulless place. At the entrance of Mercer Street is where you'll find them. They rise at 3 and start thieving at 3:30. The runner's report echoed in his mind as he slipped along the 7 Dials cobblestones. Life, after all, had taught him there were greater dangers to face than the physical hurts to be dealt in London's East End. Rats chirped the Dials symphony as Broderick moved deeper into an alley the devil himself knew not to enter, and then stopped. The half-moon's glow slashed down between the narrow slats of the buildings, casting an eerie light off the heavily scarred bastard stretched out on the hard stone. "He's here." Broderick resumed his march over to that prone figure. With every step, hope, a rare emotion to these streets, spiraled through him. He'd found him. The bastard who'd kidnapped Broderick's youngest brother, Stephen, the man who'd passed off that same boy, a nobleman's child, as a street orphan. And now Broderick's very existence hung on a thread because of it. But I've found him. Broderick stopped over him. He kicked the prone man in the side with the tip of his boot. A hiss of pain whistled past the drunkard's lips as he jerked awake. Broderick took a perverse pleasure in the fear that replaced the confused glint in the man's eyes. "You!" the man rasped. Broderick smirked. "Me."